In the last 72 hours, a single figure has been quietly spreading through British farming circles, and the people running the major supermarkets are hoping you never stop to work it out. The figure is 8,486. It didn't come from a competitor. It didn't come from a hostile newspaper. It came straight from Jeremy Clarkson's own accountant, said out loud, on camera, in the latest season of his own program. And on the surface, it reads like bad news. A loss. Red numbers, the kind of thing a rival would screenshot and share with a smirk. But here's what becomes clear, the moment you understand what that number actually means. That loss isn't a failure, it's a statement. It's Clarkson doing deliberately, with his own money, the one thing every major supermarket in Britain has refused to do for 3 decades. And the reason the big chains ought to be uncomfortable isn't that he's losing money, it's why he's losing it. For 2 years, the headline story has been straightforward: Clarkson versus the supermarkets. The farmer who removed the middleman, sold his beef direct to the public, and paid British producers a fair price while the chains squeezed them for another half-penny per litre. That story is accurate, but it's only the opening act. It's the trailer. The full picture is darker, stranger, and considerably more impressive, because the full picture is about a man who looked at a loss-making operation and decided the loss was the most honest thing he'd ever put in front of a camera. So today we're going to do something the viral version of this story never bothers with. We're going to look at the actual numbers, what the beef costs, what it earns, what Clarkson is prepared to lose to stand by his word. And by the time we're done, you'll understand why a man losing 8 grand on a country pub is outmaneuvering an entire industry that generates profit by the lorry load. Stay with me. This is the part they really don't want you thinking about. Let's go back to where the frustration began. Because everything Clarkson built grew out of one moment of pure, concentrated injustice. Year 1 on the farm. Clarkson grows 16 tons of potatoes. Grows them properly. Months of effort, genuine hard work, the whole punishing business of it. And the supermarkets won't take them. 16 tons is too small a quantity for them to bother with, and too large to shift from a roadside honesty box. So the potatoes sit there and rot in a shed. And Clarkson learns, on camera, in real time, the lesson every British farmer already knew in their gut. The system is not designed to pay you what your food is worth. It is designed to pay you the absolute minimum it can justify, and to make you feel grateful for it. That's the wound the whole enterprise grows from. The rotting potatoes. The dairy farmer receiving 28 pennies, not pounds, for a liter of milk that ends up on a Tesco shelf for over a quid. Decades of quiet, grinding erosion. And here's what the supermarket industry genuinely failed to anticipate. When that played out on screen, the British public didn't just nod along sympathetically, they got angry. Not mildly concerned. Properly, drive an hour and a half furious. The kind of anger that makes you point your car at a shed in Oxfordshire and spend 50 quid on a candle and a jar of honey just to feel like you'd done something meaningful. That anger is the foundation of everything that follows. Because Clarkson didn't squander it. He turned it into a commitment, not a marketing line, an actual commitment, with actual rules, that cost actual money to honor. He'd raise his own beef, his own pork, his own lamb. He'd sell it directly to people. And when he opened the Farmer's Dog pub in August 2024, the old windmill boozer near Burford, bought for under £1 million and transformed, he held himself to a standard no supermarket in this country would ever put in writing. 100% British. Not mostly. Not British where practical. Every single thing on the plate, the beef, the pork, the lamb, the vegetables, the beer, the spirits, even the cooking oil. No Coca-Cola, no avocados, no imported black pepper. If it wasn't grown or reared on British soil, it did not come through the door. No exceptions. No quiet substitutions when no one was watching. A Michelin-starred chef described it as one of the most genuinely committed supply chain operations he'd ever encountered, and the public responded with their feet. Hundreds queued for hours on opening day. The demand was so extraordinary they had to build a 360-space car park in an adjacent field just to manage the volume. Over 140 people employed on day 1. People came from Birmingham, from London, from further still, just to stand on an actual farm and eat actual food. But here's the reality of a commitment like that. A commitment to keep everything British, without exception. Keeping it is expensive. Relentlessly, brutally expensive. And this is precisely where the story shifts. Because what Clarkson does when that bill arrives is what separates a man with real principles from a man with a well-crafted press release. In Season 5, there's an episode where Clarkson sits down with Charlie Ireland. If you watch the show, you know Charlie. He's the numbers man, the accountant, the human cold shower whose entire function in this saga is to walk into a room where Clarkson is feeling optimistic and quietly dismantle it with a spreadsheet. In this episode, Charlie runs the figures on the farmer's dog, the pub, the single physical location where the famous diddly-squat beef and pork actually reaches paying customers. The number Clarkson reads off the page is this: profit before taxation, minus 8,486 pounds. We're losing money now. Stop. Because what happens in the next 5 seconds is the entire story. A lesser man buries that figure. He quietly adjusts the prices upward. He substitutes in some cheaper imported ingredients that nobody on table 9 will ever detect. He protects the margin, guards the brand, and makes absolutely certain that number never leaves the building. That's what a supermarket would do. In fact, that is precisely what supermarkets have been doing for 30 years. Protect the margin at the farmer's expense and smile about it in the annual report. Clarkson put it on television. He let the cameras capture the moment his own business told him it was bleeding money. He handed his critics the exact ammunition they'd been hoping for. Why? Because the loss is the truth, and the entire point of the operation was to stop deceiving people about food. And when you understand why the pub is losing money, you stop reading it as failure and start seeing it as the cost of integrity, line by line. The pub is fully booked every single day. That ought to be a straightforward win, and in one sense it is. But that level of popularity drags an extraordinary tale of costs behind it. £47,000 a month just on parking attendants. Read that again. Not chefs, not waitstaff, not beef. Parking attendants. Because so many people want to come that it became a road safety problem on the surrounding lanes, and someone has to physically stand there and manage it. The pub's own popularity is among its biggest costs, and it continues. The theft alone is staggering. Clarkson has spoken about losing around 400 pint glasses every single week, plus 200 pounds worth of cooking oil, light bulbs, and, I promise this is not invented, urinal traps walking straight out of the building. The electricity supply to the site is so inadequate that a permanent grid upgrade has been quoted at £200,000. And while they wait, they've been running a generator at roughly £100 a day just to keep the lights on. They installed a 6,000-liter water tank that refills overnight, and the pub still runs dry because the demand is relentless. That is not the portrait of a man who cannot run a business. That is the portrait of a man absorbing every cost the modern world can throw at him, rather than break the one promise he made about where the food comes from. And then comes the line that should make every supermarket executive quietly put their head in their hands. Clarkson, in his own Sunday Times column and echoed on the show, admits that for every customer who walks through the door and eats, he loses around 10 pounds. His framing was almost a direct appeal to the diner. Your lunch is costing me considerably more than it's costing you, so please be kind to my staff. Think carefully about what kind of man says that out loud to millions of people. Not a man concealing a loss, a man standing directly in front of it, pointing at it, and saying, "This is what it actually costs to do this properly, and I am paying it anyway, because the alternative is to do what they do, and I won't." Now, when those figures started circulating, the press did exactly what the press reliably does. They reached for the easy, lazy angle. Too expensive. Look at the prices. Rip-off. 24 pounds for a Sunday roast. 26 if you want beef and pork on the same plate. 14 quid for 2 pints of Hawkstone. 10 pounds for a medium glass of white. A 12% service charge on top. Every paper, every clickbait outlet, the same single word. Expensive. And in reaching for that word, every single one of them walked directly into a trap. Because the actual facts say the precise opposite. Clarkson, being Clarkson, had done the research. He'd surveyed the other pubs in the area, the local competition, and the farmer's dog came out cheaper than most of them. He highlighted a chicken liver parfait with sourdough, priced at £9.50, against a local average closer to £12.50, and around 15 quid for the same thing at a nearby award-winning gastropub. Now sit with that contradiction, because it shouldn't be possible. The pub is losing money and charging less than its competitors. Those two facts are not supposed to coexist in the same sentence. A normal business running at a loss raises its prices to stop the bleeding. Charlie, the accountant, said exactly that in plain terms. Put the prices up. Clarkson's response was that he's already cheaper than everyone around him, and he's not going to penalize the people queuing down his lane for a problem they didn't create. So how on earth do you charge less than your rivals and still lose 10 pounds a head? There's really only one explanation, and it's the core of this entire story: the British-only commitment. Clarkson has explained it himself. Sourcing British black pepper alone cost roughly 10 times more than simply importing it like everybody else does. The British beef and bacon from the farm, those he can just about manage on the numbers. But holding every single ingredient to a British standard in a world where the entire global food supply chain is engineered to make the imported version cheaper means he's paying premium prices on the way in while deliberately keeping his prices down on the way out, and personally absorbing the difference. The supermarkets escape that cost by sourcing from wherever on the planet is cheapest, on every ingredient, every time, and quietly pocketing the gap between what it costs them and what they charge you. That gap is their entire business model. Clarkson looked at that gap and refused to take it. He pays the British premium, keeps the customer's price fair, and eats the loss himself. The supermarkets call that bad business. Clarkson calls it the whole point. And the public, the ones queuing down the lane in the rain, know exactly which of those two they actually trust to feed them. So here's the question that genuinely matters. The one the lazy headlines never get round to asking. If the beef loses money on every plate, and it does, then how does the whole operation keep running? How do you fight a war like this, bleeding 10 pounds a customer, and not simply collapse by Christmas? This is the part where you realize what Clarkson actually built. And it's far cleverer than a pub. He never staked everything on the beef turning a profit. He built an ecosystem, a machine where every component feeds every other, so that one part is permitted to run at a deliberate, principled loss because the rest of the engine carries it. Start with the engine itself. Amazon reportedly paid Clarkson somewhere in the region of $160 million across a 3-season deal for Clarkson's farm. The show became one of Prime Video's most watched UK originals. Full stop. That isn't beef money. That isn't pub money. That's platform money. And here is the masterstroke almost everyone misses. Every loss-making, principle-driven, stubborn decision Clarkson makes becomes the content that funds the next one. Every grim meeting with Charlie, every "we're losing money," every battle to keep an ingredient British when imported would cost 1/10 of the price. That's not just a cost. That's footage. That's the show. And the show is worth more than any margin a supermarket has ever extracted from a dairy farmer. Sit with the elegance of that for a moment. The supermarkets spend hundreds of millions a year on advertising to persuade you they care about British farmers. Clarkson gets paid handsomely to demonstrate, in unscripted real time, that he actually does. They rent the appearance of integrity. He sells the genuine article, and the cameras fund it. Then the rest of the machine assembles around that engine. The farm grows the barley. The barley becomes Hawkstone lager. And unlike the brewery myths floating around online, here are the real audited numbers. The brewing company's equity climbed from £432,000 to over $3 million in a single financial year, on sales that jumped from $7.8 million to $21.3 million. The beer sells in the pub serves the beef. The farm shop sells both the beer and the beef to the people who drove 2 hours to be there. The show promotes every link in the chain to millions of viewers at once. And every one of those viewers who shows up becomes a walking advertisement for the next person. So the beef is permitted to lose. That's the genius. The beef isn't a standalone operation that has to justify itself on a spreadsheet. It's the beating heart of something considerably larger. And a heart doesn't have to turn a profit. It just has to be real. As long as the beef is genuinely British, genuinely fair to the farmer, and genuinely good, it does its job. It makes the whole story true, and a true story, in Clarkson's hands, is worth more than money. That is what the supermarkets cannot replicate, regardless of their scale. They can match his size 1,000 times over. They can undercut his prices in their sleep. What they can never manufacture is a man the British public has watched and trusted for over 20 years, who would rather lose 10 pounds a plate than serve a single lie about where your dinner came from. You cannot buy that on a media plan. You cannot reverse engineer it in a boardroom. Clarkson built it the only way it has ever been possible to build it, by genuinely, stubbornly, expensively meaning it. Let's answer the question in the title directly. Did Clarkson actually outsmart every supermarket? Or does the loss prove he didn't? Here's the honest answer, and everything turns on what you believe the game actually is. If the only game that counts is margin, squeeze the farmer as hard as possible, source the cheapest ingredient available anywhere on the planet, charge the customer whatever the market will bear, and bank the difference, then no, Clarkson isn't winning that game. He isn't even playing it. He is actively, deliberately refusing to. He is losing money on every cow on purpose and telling you so on television. But that was never the real game. That was their game, the one they wrote the rules for. The real game, the one Clarkson chose, is trust. And on that measure, it isn't remotely close. Consider what the supermarket started with. They had everything. The capital, the land, the distribution networks, the data, the supply chains, 30 years of every conceivable advantage the modern economy could offer, and they spent all of it learning how to pay a British farmer 28 pennies for a liter of milk and feel clever about it in the quarterly results. They held the whole board, and they used it to get smaller, meaner, and cheaper. Clarkson walked in with a camera crew, a short temper, Caleb's actual farming knowledge, and a flat refusal to compromise on where the food comes from. And he built something that feels more real to the British public than anything that has ever rolled off a Tesco distribution line. He didn't beat them at their own game. He exposed their game. He made the entire country flip the packet over and read the small print instead of trusting the Union Jack printed on the front. He demonstrated, out loud, on camera, with his own bank account as the evidence, that you can do this properly. You can pay the farmer fairly. You can keep everything British. You can charge the customer a reasonable price. The only condition, the single non-negotiable, is that you have to be willing to lose money to mean it. The supermarkets will never be willing. Not once, not for a single quarter. That is the entire difference between them and him. And Clarkson just illuminated it for everyone to see. A loss-making country pub in Oxfordshire has done more for the genuine reputation of British farming than 30 years of "We proudly support British growers" posters in supermarket windows ever managed. That isn't Clarkson failing to outsmart them. That's Clarkson outsmarting them so thoroughly that they haven't yet realized the board has been flipped and the rules have changed beneath their feet. Now here's the part that should genuinely keep a supermarket boardroom up at night. And it isn't the $8,000. The $8,000 is nothing to them. They lose more than that down the back of the sofa. What ought to terrify them is the proof of concept. For decades, the entire industry rested on a single quiet, unspoken assumption. The belief that the British public didn't really care where their food came from. Not truly. Not enough to pay for it. Not enough to change their behavior. Not enough to actually act on it. Cheap and convenient wins every time. End of discussion. That was the foundational religion the supermarket model was built upon, and Clarkson just took a sledgehammer to it, swing after swing, on national television, and let everyone watch the cracks open up. Because look at what the loss actually proves. People are driving for hours, queuing down a country lane in the cold, booking weeks ahead, spending real money, and doing it cheerfully, for food whose entire value proposition is that it's British and the farmer was paid a fair price. The demand is so overwhelming it costs £47,000 a month just to park everyone. That is not the behavior of a public that doesn't care. That is a market the supermarkets swore did not exist, standing in a muddy field in Oxfordshire, waving its wallet and shouting, "Take my money." And every farmer in Britain is watching this happen. Every single one of them now has living, filmed, undeniable proof that another way exists. That you do not have to accept the 28 pennies. That you do not have to defer to a supermarket buyer who holds every card. That if you go direct and you tell people the truth about your food, the British public will stand behind you completely. Clarkson didn't write a polite letter to a supermarket procurement team. He didn't convene a working group or commission a report that would gather dust in a filing cabinet. He built the thing, took the loss on the chin, filmed every moment of it, and in doing so, handed every farmer in the country both a blueprint and a reason to believe it could genuinely work. That is the real threat, not one country pub's red ink. The idea, now proven, now watched and rewatched by millions, that the supermarket's 30-year stranglehold on British food was never anywhere near as unbreakable as they spent 30 years insisting it was. Clarkson just showed the whole country that the door was unlocked the entire time. And once people know the door opens, you cannot make them forget it. So let's return to where we started, minus 8,486 pounds. Clarkson's own number, off his own books, read aloud on his own show. A supermarket would have buried that figure so deep you'd need industrial equipment to find it. Clarkson broadcast it to millions, because that loss is the proof. Proof that he'd rather lose money than break a promise about British food. Proof that the British public will queue down a country lane to support a man who actually, expensively, means it. And proof that the entire industry that spent 30 years squeezing farmers for another half penny was always beatable. Not on price, never on price, but on the one thing they can never fake. So here's my question, and I want your answer in the comments. Is Jeremy Clarkson doing more for British farming than 30 years of governments and supermarkets combined ever managed, even while losing money on every single cow that walks through his kitchen? Because from where I'm standing, a man willing to lose 8 grand and 10 pounds a plate to keep his word just made every "We support British farmers" poster in every supermarket window in the country look like exactly what it always quietly was. And while you're down there, tell me this. Next time you're standing in a supermarket aisle with a packet of beef in your hand, are you going to check the back of the label? The real label, not the flag printed on the front. Because once you've actually seen how the sausage gets made, and who pays for it, and who refuses to, you cannot unsee it. 2 options. Drop yours below. I read every single one.